So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now, again, He's moving into another aspect of our lives. So far Allah has talked about how we are walking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has talked about how we interact with people. Allah has talked about what we spend our nights doing, right? All of these different things. Now another aspect of our life that's very important to us, He mentions that the way they spend their money is balanced. That the way they spend their money is balanced. That they're not totally extravagant. And Allah mentions, by the way, the two extremes here, because people will generally fall into one of these two extremes. On one hand, you have people who are very, very extravagant with their money. They spend very lavishly on things that are absolutely not needed, right? Absolutely not needed. But they spend money just because they have it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed them with that wealth. But they spend it, on useless things. And they spend it carelessly. So they're very, very wasteful. That's one extreme. On the other hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it's also not okay to be stingy, where you're just hoarding all of your wealth, and you don't want to spend any of it. And you don't want to spend it on your family, you don't want to spend it in the cause of Allah and making donations, you don't want to spend it anywhere. Right? And this is not even just talking about, the scholars, the Mufassirun, they mentioned, this is not even just talking about in terms of donations and charity, right, or zakat. This is just general spending habits, right? That these people, they have like some sense of control when it comes to their spending habits, right? That they're not totally lavish, but they're also not stingy, right? When there's a need, when there's an opportunity, and they're able to spend, then they spend, and they do it in a way that's balanced. وَكَانَ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ قَوَامًا, that they stand balanced in between these two extremes, right? And this is something that we again really need to remind ourselves of, because generally speaking, a lot of us, we fall within one of these two extremes, right? We tell ourselves that we can't spend any money at all, or we tell ourselves that we're going to spend all of our money, and then that's when you have situations where people are like taking out loans to do things and all these other things, and to spend money that sometimes they don't even have. And again, if there's a need, that's different, but we're talking about situations in which it's beyond the need, it's extravagant, right? And so this is another really important thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning here. The next characteristic which Allah mentions, He says, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَدْعُونَ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ وَلَا يَقْتُلُونَ النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ وَلَا يَزْنُونَ. Three things Allah mentioned in this ayah, but I'll summarize with one trait. He says that these are the people who don't call upon other than Allah, nor do they take an innocent life, and nor do they commit fornication. They don't commit zina. So now the question comes up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking about all of these small, basic things. He was talking about like the way we interact with people. He was talking about the way that we walk, about the way we spend our money, all of these things. Now all of a sudden, the tone shifts. Right now, all of a sudden, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about three of the biggest sins that anybody can possibly commit, which is shirk, murder, and zina. Right? He mentions these three things together. And He says that Ibadur Rahman are the ones that are not going to do these three things. Now, this may beg the question, which is, why does Allah mention this in this passage? Like, if this person is so careful to be humble in their interactions with people and to control their anger, and they're so careful with their money, and they're standing in tahajjud in the middle of the night, would this even be a concern for them? Why does Allah mention this here? Right? And by Allah mentioning it, He's teaching us a very beautiful lesson, which is that we cannot simply focus on the little things at the expense of the bigger things. Right? We need to focus on both. And it seems like maybe that's intuitive or that's common sense, but we see this happen on a regular basis. How many times is it that we prioritize the things that are, for example, sunnah, over the things that are fard? Right? Biggest example I can think of is during Ramadan, when we see the masajid are filled, absolutely filled for Taraweeh. Right? Everybody is coming for Taraweeh. Sometimes they'll even miss Isha salah, and they'll catch tarawih, but they'll feel okay with that, right? And we know that the tarawih, even though it's a very, very highly recommended and virtuous sunnah, at the end of the day, it's still sunnah. It's not a fard. But people prioritize that over the fara'id themselves. They may even miss some of the daily prayers, like the 5 obligatory prayers, but they will never miss these extra salawat, right? And this is just one example, but there's so many other examples that we fall into, right? And we don't do it knowingly, right? A lot of times it's something that happens unknowingly. We don't even think about it, but we find ourselves falling into it by accident, right? And so for people who are like organizing events, or they're involved in activist work or Islamic work of any sort, this is something that they actually fall into a lot, right? They'll be so concerned with making sure everybody else is praying and getting ready and everything else is going according to plan, that they'll forget about themselves. They'll completely forget about themselves. So Allah is mentioning here that even though this person, Ibad al-Rahman, is focusing on the little things, his interactions with people, controlling his anger, the way he's humble, even though he's focusing on all of those things, in addition, he doesn't let that get in the way of his focus on the big things. Right? He doesn't let that get in the way of it. He makes sure that he's focusing on both. And this is very, very important, right? That's why Allah mentions the biggest of sins here that he doesn't feel safe from. And again, it's important that we keep this in mind, because sometimes we place emphasis on the other things and we forget about what our religion is actually based on. What are the foundations of our religion? What are the fara'id? Right? These are the things, what are the obligatory acts? These are the things that we need to make sure we have, really, really strong in addition to these extra actions. Right? We can't just simply focus on the extra and ignore everything else. Maybe we'll do one more, and then we can finish, inshallah. One more characteristic, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَشْهَدُونَ الزُّورِ. He says, and I'll combine this actually with the next one, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَشْهَدُونَ الزُّورِ وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. He says that, first of all, they don't bear false witness. And this means two things. One is that they're not going to bear witness to anything that is false. So if they know something is not true, they're not going to go and testify that it's true, for example. That's one meaning. But the other aspect of this as well is that zur encompasses anything that's unlawful, right? Any unlawful action. So they are not going to go and take part or observe or witness anything that displeases Allah, right? And that connects to the next ayah, which Allah says, وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. When they pass by anything that's kind of useless or false, they pass by it with dignity. Right? That they don't want to be a part of it. And something very, very important, and I'll wrap up with this, something very, very important about the way Allah mentions this is that they do it with dignity, with kirama. They do it with nobility, with dignity. This is so important. Right? Some of us, we have this real issue, is that when we are faced with a situation that we don't necessarily agree with, maybe there's somebody who is doing something that, honestly, it could be wrong. It could be something that Islam does not promote, that the Prophet ﷺ and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not be happy with, right? That could be true. But the way in which we advise them and the way we go about handling that situation is extremely important, right? How many times do we go into a situation accusing the person, humiliating the person, making the person feel like they're outcasts or anything like that, just because of some of the mistakes that they're making, right? What we find with the Prophet ﷺ is that his method of giving advice was so beautiful, right? The Prophet ﷺ would always pull people to the side. He would never humiliate people publicly, never. He would pull people to the side. He would speak to them gently. He would talk to them in a way that showed love and affection, right? He wouldn't be judgmental. Right? This is an issue that especially a lot of the youth they face, is that they feel like people in the masajid and they feel like people in the communities are just judgmental. That they may not even be doing anything wrong, but just by the way that people are looking at them, they feel like they're doing something wrong. Like that they're in the masjid and they're there and they're amongst the good company, but just the way people are looking at them, the way that people are interacting with them, they feel like they're doing so many things wrong, even though they're doing nothing wrong. And this is a big mistake that we're making in our communities. And it's something Allah is telling us that in these moments, you have to do it in a dignified way. That means that you yourself are dignified, but you also dignify the other person. And you make sure that you don't humiliate that other person. That's extremely important, right? So this is something we need to keep in mind. There's 2 more characteristics I won't cover.
No, finish it, please.
How much are we done? Time or?
We got 2 minutes.
We're done, but
I don't want to go over the time, but inshallah maybe we can cover this afterwards. But lastly, just want to say what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes as being the reward for these people. We sat through all these characteristics. We need to understand what is it that Allah is promising for these people who do these actions. He says, أُولَٰئِكَ يُجْزَوْنَ الْغُرْفَةَ بِمَا صَبَرُوا. So beautiful. He says that these are the people who they'll be rewarded with al-ghurfa, and I'll explain what this means in a moment. For what they have endured, for their perseverance. In other words, Allah is saying that they went through struggle. These characteristics are not easy, and I should have mentioned this in the beginning. These are not easy things, right? This concept of Ibad al-Rahman, this is a higher group of people. These are people who hold themselves to a higher standard. So it's not easy. And Allah mentions that. He says that because of their perseverance, they're given this reward, al-ghurfa. Now what is al-ghurfa? It's mentioned that these are lofty mansions in paradise. Like huge houses in paradise. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising that for these people, that they're going to be given this tremendous reward, huge mansions in paradise. Al-ghurfata bima sabaru. وَيُلَقَوْنَ فِيهَا تَحِيَّةً وَسَلَامًا. And they'll be met in these gatherings with greetings and with peace. Notice how in the dunya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that these people, when ignorant people would address them, قَالُوا سَلَامًا, they bring about peace. Now, because of that, because they brought peace in the dunya, Allah is giving them ultimate peace in the hereafter. Subhanallah. Allah is giving them ultimate peace in the hereafter. And He's saying that they'll be met with this. And then finally, Allah, He ends with saying, حَسُنَتْ مُسْتَقَرًّا وَمَقَامًا. Just like Allah said that hellfire is the worst place to be as a temporary spot and as a permanent residence, Allah now mentions here as well that Jannah, this place, and specifically Al-Ghurfa, is an excellent, the best of places for you to settle for even a temporary time and for all of time. Right? Even if we were there for a few moments, it would be incredible. But Allah is telling us that you're going to be there forever. You're going to live there forever. خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا, that you'll live there forever. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to fulfill all of these characteristics. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to constantly reflect on the verses of Quran. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with the reward of Al-Ghurfa in Jannah and to forgive all of our sins. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Excellent work, Sheikh.